This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Rock and Roll Denim, Bill Fick Ford, the WCRA, and Resistol.
Attention all rodeo athletes. Join us for the Cowtown Christmas Championship Rodeo in December. Over $360,000 in prize money in the historic Cowtown Coliseum in Fort Worth, December 14th through 17th. And no entry fees. Qualify using the VRQ for the Triple Crown of Rodeo $1 million cash bonus, featured on a CBS network broadcast. To get started, go to the App Store, download the WCRA Rodeo app, and hit nominate. This is your chance to rodeo in December. Nominate today or visit us at WCRArodeo.com.
Guys, another year has ticked by, challenging year, but there was somebody you could rely on if you needed a new Super Duty pickup, and that was Bill Fick Ford. Once again, the #1 Super Duty dealer in the entire country. You guys have seen what's going on in the car business, in the truck business. You're seeing trucks being sold for thousands above MSRP. Well, if you go to Bill Fick Ford, it doesn't matter where you are at in the continental U.S. He will take care of you. He will stand by the product, and he will not take advantage of you. Guys, Bill Fick Ford is the only place you can go in 2022 for a no-bull discount. Bill Fick Ford.
What sets Resistol apart is the legacy of the cowboys who wear the brand. These traditions are passed down from fathers to sons, from heroes to future champions. Since 1927, Resistol has been handcrafting the finest American-made cowboy hats. Generation after generation, we live it every day.
This is The Gauge with host Chance Conradu.
Are you freaking serious? It's Conrado. This is The Gauge, and I am Chance Conrado. On this episode of the podcast, we have got Robert Chown. Robert is one of the most respected people in the entire cow horse industry. He's got over 22 world titles, and he has also trained 50-plus world champion horses. He's a wonderful guy. He's won awards as a commentator. He's very diverse and very intelligent, and I sure enjoyed talking to him. Check it out.
Kind of have an obstructed view, but we'll...
You know,
work
for
around
a few years now, I've been like, this really bothers me. Why did you put it right there? And zero hint has been taken to move it.
So in other words, I just brought something back up.
Oh, it's been brought up many times. Like, so what do you say? Can we move that at some point? And he's always been like, yeah, we'll do that. And it's still there.
Just give me the drill and I'll take care of it.
I don't think it'd be real complicated.
Tie with power tools.
He did it.
See, I would move it to the right of Robert, but then that would block your camera.
I also suggested that other microphone, and you talked me out of it.
You mean the microphone arms that were like $500?
Yeah, but we only need the one. Anyway.
I guess. We need uniformity. We need two.
Not really. Not for our purposes. No one would notice that.
Trust me, someone would notice.
Well, Robert, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
It was an interesting conversation with your daughter. And I was like, Riley, a lot of people come in and out of here and they're like, tell your dad hi. Tell your dad hi. Man, your dad's a good guy. And I'm like, it's real strange, Riley, that you have never suggested your father come on this show. Why is it you haven't done that? And she was like, well, I just don't think he has much to say.
Well, yeah, I didn't figure that
She didn't say that.
I didn't think she wanted to feel like she was pushing.
Oh, shoot. No, but then in all seriousness, I was like, man, there's another guy who's like, hey, Riley, tell your dad hi. I was like, we probably should have your dad on here at some point.
Find out why all these people want to say hi. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. What does he know that I don't know that everybody wants his attention for? But I do know, based on, kind of what she's told me and what have you, that you've had a pretty interesting life and as far as horse training goes, a pretty illustrious career. And what I've found, and kind of the whole point of this show, is that there's a lot of good that can come out of stories from people like you, and a lot of good information that you really can't get anywhere else. And I'm sure you agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, the horse industry, horse training, I feel like horse training is a lot like dealing with people in ways. You have different personalities of horses. You have, some you need to push and some you don't. And some relationships blow up in your face and, some work out well. But I think that especially the whole deal has changed over the course of my career. I kind of make a joke that I'm like one of the youngest of the old guys. I mean, there's guys older than me that I think are some of the older of the young guys, because we grew up, where I grew up in an era where, nobody specialized in anything. They brought you a horse, you trained it. You found out what that horse could do. You steered it in a direction. Pretty much now everybody specializes. It doesn't matter whether you ride cow horses, reiners, cutters, you barrel race, you rope, you do that. If you're going to do it at a high level, that's what you do. So, and I think, a lot of ways in that with life too, but it's also, it has been great for, I think that you would agree that in any discipline right now, the level of competition is amazing. I mean, I can remember when they're running, you got to be a 16 something on a standard pattern in the barrels now to really get after it.
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, I remember 17.4, 17.5 was a dang good run, won a lot of rodeos. Just taking that discipline, because I know it's a lot of where, you have a lot of rodeo people listening, but, or in the reining or the cow horse or the cutting or the roping or the whatever, but that, what I call the age of specialization, when that kicked in, that makes all that great. But I realize kind of taking this all the way, taking this away from your original question already, but I kind of get that way. I just kind of wind me up and I kind of go somewhere.
It makes for good podcast.
But what it does too, I think the negative the part of that is, I think some general horsemanship has been lost.
I agree. People don't quite. Well, and in the horses too.
Yeah. Now the horses have gotten very specialized, but that's also because too, somebody says, well, I want a real versatile athlete, and I mean, that's wonderful. Everybody wants that. But that horse is probably not going to win at the highest level at any one thing then, because it's just gotten too tough.
Yeah, the whole master of none thing.
The barrel
really applies.
Horses run faster and turn faster. The reining horses stop harder and spin faster. The cutting horses do more freaky things in front of a cow. The cow horses do their deal. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like the athletes, bigger, stronger, faster. It's that way in the horse deal. And I think because of that too, the riders, the trainers, have learned how to deal with that kind of athlete now. And they have also become so specialized, even down to the point you got some that can show one or run one, and you got some that can train one. And that's not always the same person. Then you got other people that can coach somebody on how to do it. That might be a completely different person altogether. So, but the good thing about that is too, is it opens up so many avenues for somebody that wants to be in this industry. There's a lot of people that can make a living now, say coaching, where when I was growing up, you did everything. I mean, you trained them, you showed them, you gave lessons, you probably stood a stud, you had a few mares, and you was hoping to sell somebody a colt, and they'd leave it with you so you'd have something to train and go show, so, but anyway.
That is a really good point, and I've always thought that like the Western world was a good 3-4 decades behind every other quote unquote sport, and the way that it, they've progressed, because you've seen that depth in other sports like crazy. I mean, you have entire careers and industries and humongous paychecks that are built around supporting like the athletes, for instance, just that part. And then there's the promoting of the sport. Then there's all these little pieces that feed like the one machine, and the Western world was missing that for a long time, and it's actually starting to catch up a little bit. And it's
yes, it is. But don't you think though, to a point, it's because some of that was hobby driven originally,
Of course.
You know, where you can be, okay, you can love football. You're never going to play in the NFL.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, and the thing but with Western disciplines, okay, that there was only a few that maybe ever got to that level where you were treated like an athlete.
Yeah.
You know,
and then it was a second rate.
Yes. And and I don't care what you're doing, whether you're rodeoing, whether you're horse showing, whether you're what, you're only as good as what you're mounted on. Okay. You can be the greatest horse trainer in the world. And,
that goes into rough stock too.
Yeah.
That goes right into bull riding. I mean, so half that score belongs to the animal. And I mean, that truly plays as big a factor as any.
So you need that animal athlete partner no matter what you're doing. Okay. Well, in our game, you know, that also then requires, different than in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball or whatever, where it's that guy. He might belong to a team, but as far as his athletic ability is based on what he himself can do, where we need partners. So we also then need partners on the human side to help us acquire those animal athletes that we have to have. And sometimes those people want to just be, there's different owners too. There's the owners that want to own the sports franchise. They have no desire to play, but they're your aged event owners or your person that maybe backs some cowboy going to the NFR and says, that's my horse that so-and-so's riding or running or roping on or whatever, you know, and they have that sports team mentality. Then you have the other owners that, they want that, but I want to play too. So I'm going to show my own athlete, you know, and I think we were so long maybe driven, and this is not a bad thing, but driven by that segment.
Yeah, which gives you, as the trainer, just that constant anxiety that you know this horse is leaving at some point.
Well, yeah, and that's just one more element that you're responsible for that's not totally in your control. You know, I can prepare the horse, I can prepare the rider to my best ability, but once I send them through the gate, it's on them.
Yep.
They got to do it. I mean, I'll yell from the side and everything else. But at the end of the day, they've got to do it, you know. But anyway, those people too, and I think with time you learn one thing, you mentioned the anxiety and stuff like that, and sometimes people don't realize that goes with being a horse trainer. There is a lot of that. I know you've talked about this on this podcast before, and it doesn't matter what discipline you're in the Western industry. There will be some of that going along because you're always. Well, not always. Most of the time, you are responsible for somebody else over your winning and losing. And somebody can jerk the rug out from under you. And even if you're a rodeo cowboy riding somebody's horse and they're not happy with how you're riding it, at the end of the day, it's their horse.
Yeah.
And they can take it from you, and you can't win without it, or you got to go find another one, and they're just not all out there. So there is that. But it's still, it's a great, I definitely don't want to act like it's, woe is us for being able to do this, because at the end of the day, I still say, it's a heck of a deal getting paid to do what somebody else pays to do.
Yeah.
I mean, and with that comes a corresponding responsibility. But you also, too, you have to look at this. Everybody does not look at the same situation the same. Somebody looking at a situation from the idea it's their hobby, somebody's looking at a situation from, it's my business. That person does not see the exact same thing the same way.
Not even remotely
And what I think
the same way.
helps immensely is when those two people can communicate, because you're going to have to, and sort things out that way and realize, maybe I just don't want to push this, maybe I don't want to walk out and call this horse a bad name that this person absolutely loves and it's his kid. Maybe I just probably shouldn't do that. And somebody says, and at the same time, maybe an owner shouldn't say, well, why did you pick that cow that you just lost? Well, like, if I thought he was a good one when I picked him, I didn't know he was going to run me over, So it's a two-way thing there that I think is so good when people will just back up, take a deep breath, look at it, see that we don't look at it exactly the same, and respect the other person's side.
Well, that all comes back to something that I've seen a lot of horse trainers or people in the Western world just struggle with, point blank, is fostering good relationships and being expert level communicators. Because you wouldn't look at a horse trainer and think that, hey, this guy needs to have a very high level of intellect and a very high level of communication skills to keep these relationships that are paying his bills and getting him to the next level together. And, that's an interesting thing. Your daughter was telling me is you've had certain clients for 25 plus years, even further. And that's a testament to that whole notion, right? That, the biggest element of pretty much anything that you're going to do, not just horse training, but a business venture, employment, intersexual relationships, for God's sake, like, it's going to be communication. And certainly something I've struggled with, thinking like, I know what I'm doing, I don't got to tell you. And then what ends up happening is these things implode.
Well, yeah. And the thing is too, a lot of great horse trainers are introverts.
Yes,
Okay.
they are.
Because it's almost at its highest level, I feel it's an art form.
Yeah.
And they're a little artisty.
There's a lot of isolation outside of the shows.
There's a little actor in them, because you get out there, you are putting on a show. You are presenting this horse, okay? And you have to go in there in competition and say, look at me, look at my horse. We're better than them. Okay? So with that comes that a little bit of that actor or that theatrical mentality.
Yeah.
But a lot of real artistic people like that are introverts. They're not good at communication in that way. They communicate great with horses, but horses too are wonderful to communicate with, because I've never met very many horses that ever lied to me. They may be sorry. They're pretty upfront about it.
Yeah. Yeah, they are.
Okay. I rarely ever got pawed in the head by one that didn't tell me he was a little bit that way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They like them, don't like them, whatever. Horses are honest. There's very few things a horse does that can't be predicted, because they're honest. Now, you might push the wrong button, and I've done it. We've all done it.
You might not know how the buttons are labeled. But
looking back, I can see how that happened, But going back to the my deal changed is probably the way I was raised. I don't know. Believe it or not, I think I could be an introvert. Now you're saying, well, you haven't shut up since you sat down.
Well, you're not supposed to shut up on a podcast. That's the point. So it works out great.
But the way I grew up, okay, see, my dad had a huge livestock operation in Southern California, and it wasn't a horse show operation. I didn't grow up. I have 3 brothers, and they're all been highly successful horse trainers, all of them world champions. And but we didn't grow up in a horse training deal. Okay. My dad's deal was horse sales and education. Okay. He ran a camp for kids. He later started a college because he couldn't get enough good help, I think, was the reason he started the college.
Gotta imagine if he was trying to do it right now.
Yeah, I mean, but at its day, when I was growing up, and I am considerably younger than my brothers, we were giving 31,000 riding lessons a year. Get your mind around that one. 200 kids a day in the summertime, weekend camps, Christmas camps, Easter camps, So, and then he would go, and I would have to be his little promoter sometimes. So I'd be standing there, be 10 or 11 years old, and I'd be standing there not knowing anything was coming. And then all of a sudden he'd push me out there and say, "Now, Robert, tell the folks why they should come to camp. What are you going to learn when you come to camp?" I only do it about twice because that wasn't going to go over well, So you get shoved out into those situations, and I think that's how you go through. You're a product of your life experiences too. I mean, you have your talents, you have your just like that horse, and that's where I said it's interesting how horse training and life goes together.
Yeah,
horses. They're born with however much talent they've got. They're born with what looks they have. They're born with what conformation they have, all of that. But there's a lot of environmental stuff that goes into a horse. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of horses that could be really good that are ruined. There's a lot of average horses. That average horse will never be a great horse. But there's a lot of average horses that can go be good at an event because they got in the right environment, they got the right training, they learned how to do it, and they got real solid at what they do. And I mean, and I think that's the same thing to a point with people.
I think it's 100% the same thing with people. I mean, if you look at kind of the core things that form the person you might be, not unlike the horse, you're a product of your experiences, your environment, and your traumas. Kind of have three things.
Absolutely.
The place you spend your time, the things you do, the people you're with during that time, and the things that are bad that happen to you in that time period. And those things all go together to pretty much create the blueprint for who you are going to be. And it continues to evolve for the bad, for the good, for the indifferent. And you might be able to change a few inherent things about yourself, just like, there's people who can fix certain things about horses. But if a horse got knocked in the head by some jackass over and over again, the chances that you're going to get him to not do this when you throw your hand in the air ever in his life, what are the chances you can get him to stop doing that? You can't. Same thing with people.
Well, I mean, I go even down to I have some brothers. Mechanically, they can fix anything. Me? Not so much. Okay? You give me a tool, I don't even know what it's supposed to do. I mean, my wife would not let me put my daughter's baby things together because she was afraid that I might kill her. And the one thing I did, what was that swing set thing that I made that came apart that day? Yeah, I did. I mean, just dumb stuff like that, I got in trouble with that. But anyway, you give me a bridle and a saddle, I can teach them things to do about anything.
Yeah.
You give me one pickup and I need the mechanic to do anything with it.
Right.
But that's also too, okay, how can you be that much different than your brothers? My brothers grew up in a different deal where they were fixing stuff. They were doing this, they were doing that. There was 3 of them, Well, by the time I was of, teenager, early, even before that, they were all gone. I was the guy that had, at 16, had 40 head in training and 3 people saddling for me. Somebody hooked up the trailer and did this and did that, and I went and did here and there because at that stage, as far as the family business, that is where I was needed. That's what I was told to do, And so I never learned how to fix anything. Okay, now I learned how to ride horses, learned how to train horses, learned how to sell horses. But not the other. So again, going back to, your environmental deal, it's totally, and I don't think, it's like people, you look at people that grow up in really bad environments and make good things out of themselves. I think those people are to be admired.
Because
that's
more.
hard to do.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you rose above. In a sense, if you're that horse, you rose above your training.
Yeah, I mean, statistically, it's impossible number-wise. It's such a few amount of people, and you have to go so far back from the decimal to find one that they are so famous because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, generally, they've got some pretty terrible mental trepidations and things they have to work through, and these kind of terrifying valleys that they fall into. I mean, we were talking about Mike Tyson last night, and that's a prime example. Horrifying environment, rose to the highest peak of sports, right, in the late 80s and 90s. Thought that he wasn't worth what he wiped his ass with, did terrible things, went to prison, lost, put himself in a situation where he lost $300 million to somebody.
Yeah, which you go, how is that even possible?
Had a child die, was convicted of rape, lost every cent he had, fell into a cocaine habit that nearly killed him, and has come out of it and is a relatively inspirational guy now, even though he's got a lisp like this. You know what I mean? It's
right.
Was one of the greatest boxers of all time, but the whole time after all that, he thought he was worthless. He knew enough to get out, but he didn't know enough how to love himself to make sure that he didn't destroy it. And there's a lot of that goes around.
Yeah, well, and especially too, it amazes people, and I get it, but it amazes people how that accomplish so much. It amazes other people that person could feel themselves as worthless.
Yeah.
But again, too, it makes you wonder, and I don't know, if he wasn't told that a lot when he was little.
He was.
And a lot of times, it's the same thing in horse training, you've heard this said or whatever, a lot of times what you learn first, you learn best.
Yeah, everything's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have to unlearn certain things, but there's so many things that happen in our brains, and we were just talking about this because of some of the conversations we had last night, but it's like there is no good resource for horse trainers or people in the Western world to go get help for anything. Mm-hmm. There's just not. If you're a high-level athlete, you've got the best sports psychologists and infrastructures around you to make sure that you don't implode on yourself or try to keep you from doing it at least, but we don't have that. There's no resources.
No.
And it's something that bothers me a lot because when I was a little kid, whatever the bad things that happened, I made sure that I wrecked what was good to fulfill those prophecies, not unlike Mike Tyson. His mom told him he was a piece of shit and that he was going to end up in jail. My God, he was the world champion of every single belt that a heavyweight person could carry. Never
dominant.
Didn't lose a single round, and was one of the richest people in sports, and he somehow made sure that he fulfilled that prophecy and got his ass in jail.
Yeah.
For 5 years, 4 years. I mean, you do that. We all do that. And if everybody thinks really hard, think back to one of those things. You somehow fulfilled that prophecy, whether it was good or bad.
Well, yeah. I mean, whether you want to quote the Bible as far as a man thinketh, so is he, or whether you want to, what Henry Ford says, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
Supposedly
he said that.
Well, yeah, who knows? We'll go with it.
Yeah, exactly.
For the case of this conversation or whatever, But I think too, and I'm very into positive thinking is very, very, very important, and being positive is very, very important. But I think too, the flip side of that coin is too, though, is you can't lie to yourself. You have to, you got to know where you're at, and you can be positive that you're going to get somewhere, But, you know, I've seen some of the most insecure people I have ever met have been some of the biggest raw, positive thinking I need to be an inspirational, motivational speaker. And I'm like, well, you know, maybe we should work on our own house a little bit first. But, you know,
I think there's deeper rooted issues with that. Like, and there's some really cool resources out there, like the strides that have been made. And I don't know how many cowboy people look at this stuff besides me. I'm sure there's a lot of them who do, but it's like, if you look in some of like the medical fields, like neuroscience, some of the things that they're finding with the way our brains work and like epinephrine and dopamine and how those systems actually function. Because, I mean, you talk about it all the time, but you'll meet people who are filthy rich, who've achieved every success possible, right? And they are miserable sons of bitches. They hate everything about themselves. Everything they got means nothing to them. And you look at them and you're like, wow, you got everything. Why are you so miserable? Well, because they got their wires crossed. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, and I think horse trainers do the same thing. And I really got to thinking about this last night after conversations I had with Zane Davis about how, in his words, how hard he takes it when he doesn't win. How much pressure he puts on himself, and every horse trainer does this. Right. But, you know, he's so type A that I think it gets extreme. But, our whole system is meant to focus on the journey and not the destination. And it sounds corny, but I mean, with horses, you're training them. This whole thing that you're doing with this horse, the money that's invested, your time that's invested, vet bills, feed, fuel, everything is meant to culminate in this one performance.
Right.
And then if that performance doesn't go right, you forget about that entire journey.
Right.
And you're ready to jump off of something. And that's because our wires are crossed. We're supposed to focus on the journey.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. And I don't really know when you pick a high stress, high competitive business or lane to go on and you say, this is what I'm going to do. Some of that is unavoidable, again, because you're dealing with other things. Because I know that, again, looking at it from two sides, owner's side, trainer's side, everything else, if I go in there and I just really screwed up, I don't really think my owner wants to hear, oh, but we had fun, didn't we?
Yeah.
You know, no, they didn't have fun.
Hear that. And,
you know,
and that's probably not what I necessarily mean. Cause like I'm not a person who believes in just pure happy-go-lucky positivity for no reason. Mm-hmm. But, you know, even if it didn't go right in that one event, that owner still has an extremely valuable asset.
Yes.
At the end of that.
Well,
and that journey that built that asset, if you look at it through the correct lens, and, you know, it's so easy to say this on a microphone. You know, it's a lot harder. Like last night, it didn't work out for somebody to actually say it, but at least you can think about it, right? And try to find a pathway in your brain to not go down such a dark road.
Yeah, well, and I think the thing is too, I think both of these, all of this is not incompatible. You know, I mean, the being very competitive and at the same time enjoying the journey, it's not incompatible.
Not at all.
It's hard. You know, it's hard to do sometimes because, you know, we get so, like you said, we get so fixated on the one thing. Now, I only brought one 3-year-old here. Okay. We were sitting really good after two things. And the third thing, the fence work, didn't go so well for me. Okay. But I'm taking home a horse I like that is still well trained, that's sound, that's happy, and he will win.
And he's valuable.
I don't know when. I don't know where, but he will win. You know? And I think we have to keep that in mind, that I think if we train and that's the thing. We go back to that specialization thing. You send different people do different things. In other words, like But I mean, within the horse training realm, you have your aged event people or your futurity people, if you will. And then you have your more weekend people that go to, the weekend shows or the whatever else, and those aren't necessarily always the same. That's not the same people, the same trainers, the same everything.
Certainly isn't. Yeah.
And I think sometimes the aged event deals, whether it's the fraternities, the derbies, the whatever, if you're running at this one check for however much, 6 figures, whatever, it gets very easy to think that we have done all this, going back to what you just said a minute ago, for this. And that's where I think that we've got to eliminate that from our minds. To be good horse trainers, to be good stewards of what God has given us. No. You train the horse.
Exactly.
And if the horse is saying, and I think a lot of the negative things that are about horse training, if you'll keep that in perspective, I think go away. People talk about, putting too much pressure on them. Looking at the very downside of things that happen, whether it's putting too much pressure on horses, whether either physically, mentally, whatever, to where somehow they either get injured or they get mentally, they blow up or whatever, Usually a lot of that's done because somebody is training by the calendar.
Yeah.
This thing just said no, or said, hey, wait a minute, I don't get this. And when he says, I don't get this, if we'll have the patience to back up there and say, okay, now what about this? What about if I show it to you this way? Can you understand it that way? Rather than have that mindset is, this SOB is going to get it today. Because if he don't get it today, I'm going to be behind, and he's got to get it, and it's going to happen today. And I think, too, though, that goes back to, you talked about, environmental and how you grow up and how everything else.
That was what I was about to say.
Where I grew up, we grew up training horses that my dad could sell. Well, trust me, there's no market for one that stands on his hind legs and walks across the arena every time you pull the right rein. Okay? Nobody wants one of those. And you want to talk about, get my butt whipped. If I overloaded one to the point that, some lady that could barely ride in a car from Pasadena couldn't get on this thing and go take off, I was going to be in trouble. So I think that, but that's not always the same. Unfortunately, that's not always the same mindset on when you put deadlines on people.
Absolutely.
And going back to, as horse trainers have that responsibility, but don't just lay it all at the horse trainer. Don't be the owner that thinks that you've got to, if you have a horse trainer that you think you have to go somehow motivate to go step your horse up all the time, maybe this guy is not the guy for you. Okay. So, again, they have responsibility too. We all have responsibility,
It's a joint venture.
Exactly. So, we all have to, and I think too that, we also put sometimes, and it's the nature of the beast, it as far as the fraternity derby deal, everything else, that, we buy horses, we train horses with that in mind, that, and that's great. And that also too helps the industry. Fraternities, we're, and I dang sure do not want to for 1 minute come across like I'm anti-aged event, anti-fraternity, because it also,
that'd be tough to do, because that's always been the thing in pretty much every discipline.
But it also, though, too, it's what drives the breeding business. It's what drives all kinds of other things in the industry.
And it's the metric for where the horse is going to go next.
So it's also, too, in those events where they only have 1 year to do it, that's why you need new ones every year for it. So it's business-wise, they're very, 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 very needed, So I don't want to feel like I'm anti there. I just think that there are some times that both owners and trainers maybe need to back up and say, let's make this horse a Derby horse. If you're in 3-year-old futurities, maybe this horse in the barrel race needs to be a 5-year-old futurity horse.
It's such a tricky thing with the barrel horses because there's so many people who use that little 5-year-old loophole to not push that horse a little bit.
True.
Yeah.
Well, and that's again though, don't you think that comes down to, I don't know. I want to be careful saying this but if you have somebody that consistently can't get one ready at 4, then maybe you maybe need somebody else, but I just think that, if you love horses, and we all say, if you remember why, I think most people got into the Western disciplines because they loved horses.
Yeah, they make it because it feels good.
Yeah, and they love to be around horses. They love to just associate with them. As long as you don't lose that, you won't get too far. You won't get too far off path.
Yeah, as long as it's about the horse.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that, that doesn't mean you go out there every day. I'm not trying to act too like, if you go out there every day and you pet this thing 3 times on the right side, 3 times on the left side, and tap him on the hip twice, he's going to become a champion. Well, no. But, there wasn't, going back to people and society and everything else, there wasn't a lot of kids made great that weren't ever pushed either.
I can't think of any.
So I don't know.
Hail, son, if you're not wearing rock and roll denim, then you ain't no cowboy. I'm Dale Brisby, the greatest bull rider ever to live, and I'm known for keeping it 90. And I keep it 90 because I'm wearing rock and roll denim with reflex technology. They give me the flexibility I need to get that knee up. My biggest problem is I get an earache because I get my knee up so high, I kick myself in the ear. That's why I'm the greatest of all time. It's because of rock and roll denim, old son. Get you some.
Yeah, it's all about finding the right balance. But going back to the environment thing, it is so interesting. It's one of the great things we can learn from horses if you just really, especially young horses. I love 2-year-olds, always have my whole life. And there's so much you can learn from a 2-year-old. Because just like you said, they're going to be honest with you, and they're going to tell you when they're ready and when they're not ready. And I think one of the fail points that I've certainly had it, but a lot of horsemen have is they just don't listen to that. And they'll make certain places a battleground. And if you look at what happens with that horse when it is older, when it's that 4-year-old or that 5-year-old or whatever, it's like if you really pay attention, and it's just like kids or people, you can go back and say, oh, wow, that battleground is why this horse didn't get to the level that maybe he could have. And I'll give you a good example. I was riding a 2-year-old three days ago, and she was working really good. Like in the round pen, everything was great. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to take her out and I'm going to start working her in the arena. Well, I was mad, and I was like, this little bitch won't lope circles in the arena. And I'm like, well, maybe I pushed her too hard. And then I started fighting with her, and I'm like, hold on. If I make this arena a place of trauma, she might never work right in the arena again. It's possible. She might associate this area with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
What if I go and I try to trot my circles and take it somewhere else? All right, let's stop this fight. Let's go to the pasture. Let me see. Sure as shit, what does she start doing immediately? Picks up her lead and is trotting circles and then loping, cantering circles. Perfect. Sometimes we have to choose to get out of the environment that we're in, whether that's the horse or yourself, to get where you need to go. And I just don't think a lot of people think about that in their own lives. And certainly, you know, we can use horse analogies to explain every freaking thing that applies to humanity. But, you know, that was a great example. I was ready to lay down my freaking life with this 2-year-old, like, this bitch is going to do what I want her to do here. And she wasn't gonna.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe this is the wrong place and the wrong time. Let's go somewhere else. And it fixed it. That
Comes back, though. What you just described was about being a good listener.
Yep.
How many people are good listeners?
Oh my, it's probably the number one. It's funny. We were just talking about this last night. I think I actually brought it up that time. Is if we look at ourselves in the mirror, most people aren't listening to anyone ever. They're not. They're waiting for their turn to talk, their time to lead, their time to be in the spotlight.
Well, yes, exactly. And what they're doing, and you can tell. I mean, you can be looking at somebody and the way they're looking at you, they're not listening to what you're saying. They're plotting their response. You know, they're already, so most of the time they don't even get what you said anyway. Okay. But going back to the horses, where am I going back to the horses? That was about being a good listener. Now, sometimes being a good listener is, are you really flipping me off? You are. It's on. Come on. Let's go.
Yep.
You know? And that is also part of being a good listener. But, you know, you give them the benefit of the doubt there first. But like what you're just saying, you know, if you go and you just say, no, you're going to do this. You're going to do it this way. You know, you're going to do, I'm going to shove this round peg through that square hole no matter what.
Yep.
You know, it doesn't ever work.
No.
You know, I mean, you can keep doing it, but it's not going to work.
It's not. But here, especially with the little analogy that I use, like you can really look at that one. And we decided not to do the square peg through the round hole, but we still got the result we wanted, just in a different place. And that's a pretty good analogy for life. You can still get what you want. It just might not be on your exact terms and in the exact place that you think it needs to be in that very moment.
Right. And that doesn't discount the fact that in the back of your mind, you know, we're going to have to turn around and go do this in the arena.
Yep.
But the main thing is, I got it.
Exactly.
I got it. Okay. So, I mean, you can say you won, whatever, you know. One of the biggest downfalls with people training horses is they teach them to say no, especially colts. Okay? If you teach one to say no and you teach one to be skeptical, because everything you give them is basically you're asking them a question until they're totally solid at what they're doing, you know? I pull the right rein. Will you give over here to the right? You know, whatever. Doesn't matter what you do. You're asking them a question. Will you do this? You know, and when you get them saying no or why, you know, like again, going back to some little kid, you know, that you say, hey, would you, you know, pick up your Coke can over there? Why? Well, that's an unruly little son of a gun. I mean, you know, after a while, you want to knock the crap out of him, okay? And I'm not condoning knocking your children around, but still.
Certainly
you know,
not in 2022.
You know, but I am saying
she's 27, but they might still take her for that one.
but you know, the thing is so many people have to get something saying no. And even in relationships, they teach somebody to say no, or they get somebody saying no, or people get skeptical and everything's why, and everything is suspicious and everything else. Now, again, going back, that is part of environmental. They didn't get there on their own. We can go back, you know, all of that. But with horses, if you teach a colt to say yes, and he learns how to say yes, you can teach that son gun to do anything. You know, because at the end of the day, And we talk about, and it doesn't matter what you're doing as far as what discipline, okay? At the end of the day, they just have to say yes. And in most disciplines, it's come to the pole and get off the foot. I mean, it ends up being that simple to start with. Now, you can take it wherever you want to whatever refined level you want. But if they won't come to the pole and they won't get off the leg, you're pretty much screwed.
Yep. I think that's where a lot of people have a hard time getting to the next level with their horsemanship, is they just don't know how to get it to say yes to them.
Yeah. And then the frustration sets in or whatever. But you cannot ask somebody to do something you have not given them the skills to give you a successful result. You can't a horse either. You can't ask a kid who's never had a math lesson to give you the correct answers in a math quiz. Same thing with horses. They don't give them the tools. Now, when you've given one the tools and they know what they're supposed to be doing and they say no, for me, it's on. Okay? But that's when I know they know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, if you have not been clear in your education to that point, and you and they don't know what you're asking, you have no right to get after them for that, human or horse. Some bad boss that wants to get somebody or yell at somebody over something that they should have taught them how to do, or they know that this person knows how to do, but they never gave him the skills. I mean, that would be a bad boss. Well, that's a bad horse trainer. It's no different to me.
Same thing. Bad management's bad management.
Yeah. And we go look at, and I think going back to the people that are at a more novice level that want to that want to do this, that I am all about. I mean, I think that the more people we have wanting to do what we do, whatever that is a good thing. Okay? And I don't want to make it sound elitist in any way. And I think sometimes, if we're not careful, we can.
Well, especially with the barrier of entry being where it now is, it certainly feels like an elitist pursuit.
Yes, but it really, at the end of the day, it shouldn't be, and there should be a level. And whether it's pretty much any Western sport now, there is an entry level.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now it may not be, if you want to ride rein cow horses, it's not the open finals at the snaffle bet. Okay, if you want to ride barrel horses, it's not the NFR. Okay, that's and people get to doing that, and there's nothing wrong with that fantasy of seeing yourself there, but that's not the entry level. But like Clint Eastwood said, man's got to know his limitations.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to start from where you are. But I think that
which comes back to appreciating and focusing on the journey, not the destination. Because if you focus on the destination too much, the chances you're going to make it there get slimmer and slimmer because you aren't focusing on what it takes to be there. And you're not finding the joy and the peace in that journey.
I've had owners that come and rode with me, and if we could get this thing to slide 6 feet, you would think they just won the reigning fraternity.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was a personal accomplishment with them and their horse. And those kind of people are, we need those people, and we need to keep cultivating those kind of people. But and I think too that if that's another thing that I think a lot of people don't think about that I think would really help them is they want to maybe go ride with who's trendy at the time. They open up the book and they say, well, or they get on the computer or whatever. I mean, they drug me kicking and screaming into the 21st century, as my daughter can attest to. So, I still we'll go look at the book or whatever, but anyway, they want to ride with the top 5 money earners of the year or whatever. Well, that person may not even be able to tell you what they do because they've got so much natural instinct and feel and talent and this and that. You maybe need more of a coach. And, and I think that's where they automatically assume that person is the best coach. Now, how many Super Bowl MVP players ever made good coaches? Can you think of one?
I'm no football historian, but I don't know one.
Yeah, or whatever.
Ty, is there one?
I mean,
you would know. You're a sports guy, big time.
I mean, very few, wouldn't there be, Ty?
Yeah, that's very few.
I mean, or in take it to any sport.
I think really only the NBA can really vouch for that, but that's about it. In terms of just basketball, but that's no other sport really has anything like that.
But I mean, you go look at your Hall of Fame coaches. Very few of them. Most of them didn't even play, right, Ty?
They played in high school or college.
They always, they played either in high school or very low
but
level.
But I mean at a high pro level.
Never professionally. They were always a coach at some point in their life.
And they're Hall of Fame coaches. But that's a different skill set.
Completely different.
It's a different skill set being able to look at you and tell you what you're doing wrong, what your horse is doing wrong, and go from there. And be able to, rather than, because I've been, and what's going to work for you, that's a different person. And I think sometimes too, those people unfortunately get overlooked.
They do. Yeah, they really do. I mean, there's certain places for them maybe, but they certainly aren't in the limelight the way they should be honored. I mean, there's coaches of the years and trainers of the years and things like that for different things. But yeah, I mean, we should certainly be honoring and fostering a healthy appreciation for that. I know there's individual appreciation, but yeah, I mean, that is right and true, and it's important.
Yeah, because there's not to be able to see. Well, I do a lot of broadcasting too, and that is, it's part of that deal to be able to see what's going on in a split second and
verbalize it. That is a completely different skill set than, say, being a really good horse trainer or a showman. And sometimes being a really good horse trainer and being a showman or a competitor is 2 different skill sets. Absolutely.
So but that person, so, I mean, which I guess is, I'm thinking about getting more into the lesson. I mean, I have a burning desire to compete. You can't take a competitor out of the arena. I have a burning desire to compete, and I want to keep doing what I'm doing. But I also have I'm having a little more of a desire to do more of a coaching lesson thing with people. And as and different disciplines too, but I think that is a deal where you can look at somebody and not just tell them what you would do. What do you want this horse to do? What is this horse doing that you're not doing, or that he's not doing for you? And the thing is there's not a lot of people that know how a horse's mind works and how their body works. And if you know that, then you can help that person get the results they want. Because at the end of the day, if they want to ride it, if they want to show it, if they want to compete on it, whatever it is, they have to be able to do it. It's not going to be, I can't ride pick somebody that's really good. As soon as I start trying to ride like that person, I'm in a little bit of trouble. Because they're them, I'm me, and like they say, you got to do you, But I think that's a really thing that people need to look at, and go riding with other people is very important, no matter what discipline you're in. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you just have to drop whatever perceived ego you may have, or whatever vision of yourself you have, and be a novice in everything constantly and just absorb. There's so much you can learn about the same thing from so many different people. It's unbelievable what you can learn about the same thing. 100 different people will show you 100 different ways how to set a pin down, for God's sakes. Imagine what you can learn about horse training.
Well, and I think everything is constantly evolving, you know, and if you're not evolving with it, then you're going to get left behind. I mean, it doesn't matter what we're talking about, or even in life, you know, and I think that if you're not, you know, that old deal about if you're standing still, you're going backwards. You know, you have to keep evolving, and I don't care what you're doing, to me.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure I would bet you study other podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not Western ones, but other, like the highest level speakers. I mean, that's certainly one of the things that is an important thing to me, is continually evolving what you know, how much you know, and the ways that you can bring it into intelligent conversation to make it engaging for people. You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter if you're talking about horses or pick a topic. Being able to create an engaging environment where someone will listen to a long-form conversation with someone like yourself and someone like myself is something you have to continue to evolve. I don't crack nearly as many jokes as I used to. You know what I mean? So, of course, we've been living in like what feels like a very dark time period, and so I've tried to change the method of the show a little bit. But yeah, you do. You evolve and you try to get better, and you try to create more value with what you're doing. And the only way you can do that is by evolving. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, and like what you said about the cracking of the jokes and everything else, something you learned.
Yeah.
That, you know, maybe my audience doesn't want this as much, or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, but again, you know, it's if you have to keep moving forward. And it's hard sometimes. It's hard to move forward. I mean, I've been through, you know, which I don't want to dwell on this. It's just something that is what it is, because it's part of my story, my life.
Right.
You know, I've had some health issues, you know, that were difficult to come back from. But by God, we just put our head down and we keep going, you know, and it's not always easy, but we have to just keep going the best we can. And sometimes, you know, we don't get there at the rate we want, and we don't improve at the rate we want, and we don't get all of that. But we, you know, as long as we are trying, and we can look back and say we did the best we could that day, then I think we've got to be good with ourselves.
Yeah. You know, Jordan, I don't know if you know who Jordan Peterson is, but Jordan Peterson has a great line about putting like the heaviest conceivable load that you as a person can carry that. Take that responsibility and carry that. And that's one of the interesting things about training horses is you must do that. I mean, you absolutely must take on the most you possibly can for a multitude of reasons, carry that sometimes for the rest of your life. And I think that's being a successful human being. Did you take the most that you possibly could on the chin, on your back, and carry that day after day, no matter what you had to step over while carrying that load? Health issues, failures in the arena, financial problems. You know, a lot of people have been through a lot of terrible things. You were just telling me about a guy and, you know, losing a child. And I mean, could you imagine that? Or, you know, most people can't imagine the things you've went through and other people. And it's not necessarily, people get attached to their traumas too. And like, you know, they use them as an excuse for why they dropped that load and gave up on it. And it's like, to be a successful human being, not just a horse trainer, no matter what, bleeding feet, hurt lungs, you don't put down the load. You carry it the whole time.
No.
And I think that's what makes you fulfilled as a person.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's a good point, and I've actually not heard it put that way, but that makes a lot of sense, you know. And you know, there's so much negativity around us, but I think sometimes we think there's some magical place we can get that there's not going to be any negative thing around us, that bad things aren't going to happen.
That's happening in our society,
and that's just not possible. What it is where you talked about picking up the load. How you going to deal with it? What are you going to do? How many times you going to get up? One more time, then you're knocked down. That's all. One more time. That's all you get. One more time. Sometimes, you know, I think that and that's in some time in my life, it's easy to get. We all go through a point where, oh, woe is me, or we're feeling sorry for ourselves, or maybe we're not feeling sorry for ourselves. Maybe it's that bad. I don't know. I mean, you know, I don't claim to be the all-knowing whatever of everything. I mean, some people like say, well, you sure act like you are most of the time.
I
you know,
imagine they're sitting on the couch.
Got a damn opinion about everything. Well, yeah, just because I got an opinion about everything don't mean that I think I know everything, you know.
Their heads are bobbing up and down like they're going down an old dirt road.
But, you know, you just have to, you're going to be surrounded by that. And you have, to me, what has helped me is, yes, that's bad. Now, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to pick up that load?
Yep.
How am I going to get up one more time? You know, and I'm not talking about being from where I am to, you know, when you're laying in a hospital bed, yeah, you want to be an elite champion in the arena, but there's a few steps between there. You know, first of all, how do I get up out of this bed? How do I do this? How do I do that? And you know, one day at a time, one step at a time. And again, like I said, you know, I only got to get up one more time, then I'm knocked down. And that helps me. You know, it's like when I grew up, my dad, you know, he told me one time, clean all these stalls. I looked at him and said, all them stalls? I said, how am I going to do that? He looked back at me and said, one at a time, kid. I mean, sometimes our life is like cleaning stalls, you know, and there may be a whole barn of them. And guess what? Nobody's there to do it but us. And how are we going to do it? One stall at a time.
Absolutely. I think that is.
And I think when we look, because if we look at all of it, it's overwhelming. You know, if we can break it down and say, okay, I'm going to go from here, and then I'm going to go from there, and I'm going to go from there, and eventually pick up the load, what you said, and get there.
Yep. And what that turns into over time is a life worth having lived. And a lot of people just feel hopeless because they won't even start with that first step, which is the first stall.
Right.
They won't even start. They're just like, holy shit, there's 300 of them.
Right.
I'm never going to get there. And it's like, well, yeah, but because of that fear, because you refuse, and I mean, this is something that gets me going because there's a lot of people that I know who do this, is they find every reason to not pick up the load.
Right.
Well, I can't do it because of this person, or I can't do it because of that. And then you look at some of these people, it's like, well, hold on, you've got every opportunity to do it.
Right.
You know, there's people who've done it who had none of that. I just don't understand the mentality. But again, it reverts back to people being a product of their environment. How many times have you thrown your hands up and said, screw this? If you've done that a few times, the chances you're going to do it again are pretty high. So,
well, and I've also too, you know, and something that bothers me, this is a competition illustration, when somebody quits on a run. You know, I pretty much sucked the other day. I didn't quit on the run.
right.
I finished it. Now, whether it's just in my mind or whether it's reality. I never want to think that quitting is an option. Quitting is not an option. Laying down is not an option. And anytime you do something repeatedly, you get good at it. Anytime now you might say, with that being said, I'm not saying there's not times when you're bashing your head against a brick wall to go, maybe there's a door 3 feet over here. Maybe I ought to back up and go through that door. That's not what I'm talking about. Sometimes we need to back up and look at things and reevaluate and see if we're doing this wrong. But just saying, I can't, I won't, or that I don't want to do that because that's uncomfortable. I don't ever want to set a precedent that that's okay. Because, like that whole deal, where somebody says, there's a lot of quitting that boy. Okay, well, that a lot of quitting that boy didn't happen that one time. Going back to environmental training, everybody, okay, go, gee whiz, it's amazing, isn't it, how we're keep coming back to horses? Okay, everybody agrees. Horses learn by repetition, right? Horses learn by repetition. Horses learn by repetition. But somewhere, they think they only learn the good stuff. It's the same thing with people. People learn by repetition, not just the good stuff. You do the negative stuff or the things that create people that quit, people that give up on things. Enough. That's what you become. Because you get good at it. I mean, to me, a lot of that as far as that goes, and again, I'm not picking on anybody, but again, the one more time thing. That's why I go one more time. I'm not quitting on this run. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. Why? I mean, because I don't want to set somewhere in my mind, and maybe that's just me being weird about don't start it. It's like a slippery slope, don't go there. But I just feel like if I don't ever want to get good at that.
No. Discipline is kind of the key to everything. And it takes discipline to not walk out of the arena when you sucked ass, to finish the run, or to not pull up, or to not get off, or whatever the insert horse related analogy like we've been doing. It's just the key to life. It really is to just not quit. So
yeah,
I mean, there's a million beautiful ways to say don't quit. People don't like to hear the words don't quit, but it's as simple as that. Don't fucking quit.
Exactly. And it's somewhere you made a conscious decision to quit, right? I mean, at some place, if you get good at it, that's a series of things you do, and, you talk about discipline. I mean, I am very disciplined about some things and very not about others. Okay. Like, don't give a flying rip. Okay. My focus is like, it's like it's here. And then I don't necessarily get the shiny ball deal, but like my focus is right here. And then there's this other stuff that, like whatever, I mean, I don't
we have limited
care.
Bandwidth though, right? It's like you can't focus on everything. Like this stuff actually applies to whatever your path is, right? Like there's a lot of outside noise that can get in the way that clouds your path. So these things that we're referring to, people are listening, it's like, this is for the thing that you're choosing to be, or what you're choosing to represent, or what have you. It's like, yeah, like I don't give two shits about basketball. I'm never gonna, so I'm not gonna focus on it, or things that don't serve you, right? Like it doesn't serve you to start reading medical journals necessarily. You're a freaking horse trainer.
Yeah, and don't care.
And don't care.
Now, I want access to somebody that's read a lot of them.
You do, different thing. But, this only pertains to what you're, like, if you're a horse trainer and that's what you have decided that you're going to be, this is my life's pursuit, I'm going to be it. You already made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go back. You've got your time in, and you've stuck to it the entire time. And maybe you decided not to at some point, but I don't know that.
No,
yeah,
we'll get to that, but Ty'll maybe cut me off here in a minute. You talk too much. Shut up. Go.
Again, our whole median is talking. People come on the show and like, did I talk too much? I was like, well, thank God you did, or we wasted our time.
Yeah. But yeah, I knew what I was going to be. Okay. Well, and also environmentally, I didn't have much choice. Okay. Now, with that being said, don't know that I wanted one. Okay. By the time I thought growing up a Roger Staubach fan, I really wanted to be quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. Okay. But by the time I was 12, I knew that was never going to happen. I was too little. Okay. And that was bad. Then I thought it was really cool when I'd go to them concerts and watch how much the girls liked the drummer in the rock band. Mm-hmm. So I thought that might be cool. I might be a drummer in a rock band. Never learned how to play the drums. So, through this whole time, though, I was riding horses. Well, by the time I was 15, this was it. This was it. And I never looked back. This is what I was going to do. I had resources to do it. My dad, like I said, he had 150 to 200 horses there all the time. I never worked for anybody. I came with a very non-traditional path to where I am now. The standard deal, you become an assistant trainer or you compete in youth and you do this. And I never worked for anybody. I also grew up in an era when there was not the amount of education available that there is now. And a lot of those old trainers, when I grew up, it was like a big mystery. It was a big secret. They didn't want to share any of their stuff with you. They wouldn't. And a lot of old trainers were like that.
Guarded, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't tell you. It's like nobody told me how to train one of these things to do. It's figure it out yourself. So they didn't want to give it to me. I took it from them. I watched them. I soaked it up like a sponge. I figured out what they was doing. I watched everything that they was all doing. I watched the reaction of the horse. How did the horse react to what they were doing? What do I like? What do I don't like? What might work for me? What might not? And I pirated it from every one of them that I could and made it my own. And so, especially like today, I don't want to sound like, like everybody gets to a certain age where they go, oh, you guys got it so easy. We walked uphill 5 miles both ways in the snow, to get to school and everything, I don't want to sound like that. But the amount of knowledge
you can learn how to train a damn horse from your phone.
Yeah.
There's so many resources for free out there that if you absorb it the right way and implement it the right way, there's $7 million, $8 million, $9 million cowboys posting on YouTube for free telling you what to do.
Exactly. So, I really don't have a lot of sympathy for somebody that says they don't know how to get started or how to get information. There's so much out there. Now, with that being said, don't think you absolutely are right about all that information on your phone, but you better go grab the lead rope.
There's a big difference from watching.
Yeah,
There's a big difference from watching on a screen somebody teaching a horse how to do anything and then getting on one and just thinking you're going to be able to duplicate that.
So, but you have to, you have to, I think, and it's not young people's faults right now. I don't even know if that made sense, but I don't blame them for some of their lack of focus. I think it was easier when I was young, trying to figure out on how to focus because I didn't have all the outside noise.
Distractions.
I didn't have the distractions they have now. Okay, but you're gonna have to rise above it. That's what it is. And what I don't like is now this idea that it is completely somebody's problem or somebody's responsibility to impale this knowledge into you. No. Just like that horse. If that horse don't want to learn, it don't matter. You have to, whatever it is, you have to crave it. And I mean, I know, you've had a lot of I've listened to enough of your podcasts and stuff like that, I don't think you've had any successful people on here that when the conversation led that way or whatever, didn't crave getting better, learning something, doing something. And like I said, by God, it wasn't a matter whether you was going to give it to them or not. They was going to take it. And what I mean by that, I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean by you take the knowledge. It's your responsibility no matter what you're going to go do. I don't care if you're going to go be a professional person at whatever, it is your responsibility to take the knowledge, to make it your own, to study. And don't kid yourself. Learning how to train horses, there is a lot of study involved, not just in how you want your program to be, whatever that is. You need to learn about a horse. You need to learn how the mind works, how the body works, how their neck sets on, well, how they move. A lot of old trainers believed you turn a horse loose. You watch him lope around a round pen. That horse will tell you how you need to train him because of how he moves. Where's his neck tie in? Is he high-headed, low-headed, whatever, But all of those things, you have to be a willing participant in your education. And I think some way, because in some ways, so much information has become accessible that people aren't as good as students as they should be, if that makes sense. Again, it got too easy in that way.
Oh, absolutely. Well, attention spans are shorter and shorter, and it's programmed that way. But I mean, you're right, and these are topics that we could sit and discuss indefinitely almost, because there's just so much to unpack with all of that. But if you're thinking about young people who want to do what you do, to kind of wrap this with a final pretty bow, what would you suggest they do if they want to do what you do? How does one person decide the correct path? I mean, what do you think if someone's like, hey, you got to give this advice and it's the last advice you're giving these little sons of bitches?
Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, or whatever, it wouldn't be what I wouldn't say, a lot of guys say, well, stay in school. Don't do this. No. If you want to do this, do this. It's a great life. This is wonderful. But you better crave it, because with anything, there's going to be times when you can crave it and in something you're doing, and you're still going to wake up every now and then and go, why didn't I stay in school? Why did I do this? But I think where it's at, and it's not the same for everybody, but I think there is a few rules. Again, go back to what we just talked about. Be a good student. It's not everybody else's responsibility to line this out for you. You need to line it out. You need to be willing to work hard. You need to be willing to learn. You need to be patient. You need to be willing to be poor. You're not going to, you're not going to work for somebody for 3 months and say, now where's my A string of horses to show, run, whatever. No, that ain't how it works. You keep plodding along. Now, at the same time, if you're working for someone who is not ever going to help you get to that spot you want, well, then maybe you need to be looking around. But just because somebody's tough to work for doesn't mean you need to be moving on. If this person has information you need, if this person is helping you get to where you want to go, working for somebody is kind of like going to school. Being an assistant trainer or something like that should be looked at more like you're going to college. You're not ready to make a living doing this yet. You don't know enough. I mean, sorry. You're a student. And, to get a decent degree, that takes 4 years. Okay? Don't tell me, well, yeah, I learned everything in 90 days. Well, then I don't know very much. So at the same time, work hard, figure out, and realize that it's okay not to know everything, but you should know, kind of what way you want to head. And be realistic with yourself. Are you doing this because this is what you want? Will you want to do this if your picture is never on the cover of the magazine? Then maybe this is something you need to keep pursuing. If you're only doing this because you see yourself, there's nothing wrong with seeing yourself at the NFR. There's nothing wrong with those. Are good dreams. Nothing wrong with seeing yourself winning the snaffle bit for charity, winning the reining for winning the cut for charity, whatever. That's fine. But do you want to do it? Do you want to work this hard if that never happens? Well, then get after it. But if you're only in it for the win, for the glory, for the fame, for the this, for the that, I don't think it's going to work out real well for you, because it's too hard to get there. You have to, what did you say about enjoying the journey? Mm-hmm. You better make sure this is a journey. This is a path that you want.
You better make sure it's a journey worth stamping your one-way ticket on. You
got it. And then when you do, pull your hat down and go. And, and don't look back.
Hell yeah. I agree, and I think that is a perfect
good deal.
Last word. That was really really a good way to end it. Thank you for coming, Robert.
Thank you.
I'm really mad at your daughter that she didn't let you come sooner. Selfish, that one. This has been The Gauge, hosted by me, Chance Conrado, produced and edited by our guy, Ty Yeager. Shout out to the executive producers, Dustin Pointer and Cody Denton. Marketing and content produced by Riley Chown. Make sure to rate and review this podcast, as well as follow The Gauge on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And make sure to subscribe to The Gauge wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you guys next time.